Hello, hope you're all doing well. I know it's been a little while since my last video, and I'm sorry about that. I've just been getting back into the swing of being here since we were in London for so long. Back into the swing of work and just back into our routine, you know. But I'm back to give an update on my writing and also to talk a little bit about NaNoWriMo, which is getting closer and closer. And specifically, I wanted to talk about Preptober, which I have only really just discovered, so you can tell how prepped I really am for this thing. So maybe I really do need Preptober. But yeah, before that, quick update on the writing. It's still going really well. There's been a little bit of back and forth with some of the previous chapters that I've written, just to try and keep everything in order, in line. Basically, some of the stuff I'm writing at the moment, I feel needs setting up a bit earlier on. So I've been going back to sort of plant those seeds, which I really didn't want to do because I wanted to just get this first draft out and keep on writing it through and then do that later on in the second drafts. Yeah, when I'm actually in the midst of writing, I find myself going back just to change little bits. It's not too much, but it does slow me down quite a bit. But I'm coming up to about 25,000 words, which is really good, which means, quite interesting, so the general goal for NaNoWriMo, obviously everyone can create their own goal, but the goal which is recommended and which NaNoWriMo themselves give is 50,000 words. So if you take the 25,000 that I've already done and then add that 50,000 goal onto it, which I will hopefully do in November, that takes me to that 75,000 word mark, which was my original goal for this novel. So it's pretty exciting because it's like, it's all lining up. It's all meant to be, you know. It means if I stick to this plan and do NaNoWriMo and succeed, then it means I'll have finished the novel by the end of November, which is a month, 2 months earlier than I was planning. But even if I don't do that full 50,000 words in November, I'll still have got a whole lot closer to getting to the end, which is really cool. And I think it's exactly what I need right now, just a big chunk of progress. But yeah, backing up a bit, for people who don't know, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month. It's basically a challenge for writers to write a whole novel, or at least most of a novel, in a single month. So the goal that they give you is 50,000 words, which is kind of a doable amount, but it's still a big stretch. And yeah, I've never done it before, and I'm a little bit apprehensive of how well I'm going to stick to it because I'm so bad at planning and sticking to the plans that I make. But I think I really need to do something like this just to prove to myself that I can. But before we even get to November, I've heard about this thing called Preptober. Now, as you might guess from the name, Preptober is the month before NaNoWriMo, which is November, and it basically gives you the whole of October to prepare for that month-long stretch of writing. Now, I'm kind of going into this prepared anyway, in my head at least, because I've been writing the story for so long. It's been years now that I've been working on this story, and I've been writing it for so long that I kind of have a pretty good idea of where I'm going. Well, actually, a really good idea of where I'm going. I feel like I know the characters pretty well. I get to know them better as I'm writing this draft. So I feel pretty confident going in that I'm prepared, but I still think I could be more prepared. So I've been watching other people's Preptober videos and taking inspiration, and I think there are a few tactics I'm going to employ to prepare myself as well as I can for November. Now, I do have a little bit of a phobia of writing down my plans for stories just because I've never stuck to them in the past. And I find that as soon as I actually sit down to do any writing, it kind of all goes out the window anyway. And the story just kind of builds on itself as I'm doing it. George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones, if you didn't know that, of course everyone does. George R.R. Martin describes himself as a gardener when he's writing. And I think what he means by that is that he sort of works on the story as kind of a whole as he goes through. He plants ideas here and there. He sort of writes bits as they come to him. The benefit of that is that you can have a really dense story, full of detail and full of interlocking things going on, character motivations, all the things you see in Game of Thrones, basically. Really intricate storytelling. But the downside of that is that it takes ages. It's really, really long, and it is not suited to writing stories quickly, as you can tell, because it's been over 10 years since the last Game of Thrones book came out. But to be honest, in recent years, I've tried to be all kinds of different writers. I've tried to be really organized. I've tried to be really on it. I've tried to plan things down to the most intricate detail. But when it really comes down to the crunch, I'm just what they call a pantser, I think, which is a ridiculous name, but it's really accurate because I just write by the seat of my pants and I just do it as it comes to me. And I guess that's a form of gardening as well. That's the way I do it. But recently, and especially coming up to NaNoWriMo, I can't help thinking that there's got to be some kind of happy medium there. There's got to be some kind of in-between way of doing things. So I've looked through all my notebooks, I've dusted stuff off, and I've actually found a form of planning which I've used in the past, which has actually worked for me somewhat. Some of you who are writers have probably heard of this. It's called the Harmon Story Circle, and it's based on Dan Harmon's way of writing, who wrote Community and Rick and Morty. He didn't invent it, I don't think, but he sort of popularized it. And I tried it in the past, and I actually found it really useful because it's a form of planning which is kind of, I think of it as kind of like, it's a less intricate, less sort of micromanagement style of planning. I'll show you what I mean in a minute, but it's a really flexible way of planning your novel because you start by mapping out your major story beats. And then in between those major story beats, you gradually fill it in with sort of events and character beats and important moments in a character arc, but you do it in a non-linear kind of way. And the best thing about it is that you can change it as you go, which helps me a lot because it can remain flexible as the story changes, because it provides some kind of framework for you. So it can set you on the rails, it can set you on the tracks and keep you going, keep that momentum going, so you have a general kind of path through. But at the same time, it's flexible and you're not a complete slave to the plan that you make. In that way, I suppose it's a little bit like the snowflake method of planning. I won't go into that one right now, but that one is also very flexible and is a less linear way of planning your story, which I really like. But I won't go into that one now. I'll just start with the story circle. I won't go into the snowflake one now. Okay, so here we are. It's really useful to make one of these. You can find these to download online if you like, or I could put this one up actually, I guess, to download. I'll have a think about that, maybe. So yeah, in a way, it's quite simple. What I didn't say before actually is that this is basically just a simplified version of The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell in The Hero with a Thousand Faces. You probably know about Joseph Campbell, but if you don't, he's kind of a genius when it comes to storytelling and really about the theory behind storytelling, how to tell a good story, that kind of thing. Joseph Campbell himself said that George Lucas was his greatest student.
It does the cycle perfectly. It's not simple morality play. It has to do with the powers of life and their inflection through the action of man.
Because you can just see the skeleton of the hero's journey in Star Wars. I mean, it's in so many stories, it's in most stories, but you can see the framework in the original Star Wars film in particular. Because yeah, it follows this plan basically to the letter. And I think George Lucas acknowledged that as well. You know, he didn't hide that.
Joseph Campbell said that all the great myths, the great stories, have to be regenerated if they're going to have any impact, and that you had done that with Star Wars. Are you conscious of doing that? Are you saying, I am trying to recreate the myths of old?
Well, when I did Star Wars, I consciously set about to recreate myths and the classic mythological motifs.
But yeah, as we go through this, you'll probably see what I mean. And you'll probably be able to start fitting stories that you know into this as well. But it's a really useful planning tool, especially when you've got a tight deadline like we do with NaNoWriMo. So it's useful to have this kind of thing. And I think also for people who don't like planning, like me, as I was just talking about, this can be really useful because it's very sort of basic. It's not too in-depth, but it can also be as in-depth as you want it to be. So I've just quickly made this framework of it. There's 8 sections in it, essentially, and you basically follow round the circle clockwise. So Dan Harmon simplified the hero's journey into this sort of 8-sectioned wheel. So it's kind of the basics of storytelling, or the 3-act structure, that kind of thing. You go from order to chaos, and then from chaos back to order again. And then along the way, your character changes. It's just, that's the very basics of a story, isn't it? But it can be helpful to have it written down. So yeah, the first section is here. So it's called You, and it kind of goes, you, need, go, search, find, take, return, change. Those are the 8 sections of a story. So the first one is You, and I've written some little descriptions in each one, which we'll get to. So in the You section, this is right at the beginning of the story. It's the hero is in their zone of comfort. The world that they know is unchallenging, and possibly it's quite mundane as well. It's basically the hero, the main character, they're in their comfortable world. It's the world that they know or have grown up in. I always think about Lord of the Rings when I'm looking at this. Yeah, so think of the Shire or something, it's comfortable, it's not threatening in any way. It's what the hobbits know, isn't it? So that's where you start. That's where your characters begin. But then your main character really wants something, or maybe needs something, or needs to fix something. They have a great desire for something that is maybe missing in their life, or maybe they're forced to leave their home and find something. So yeah, this could be Frodo realizes that it's the One Ring and he has to leave the Shire, and go and destroy it, basically. Now, one thing I would say is that your story doesn't have to fit into these quite so literally. It's just useful to use like a fantasy sort of adventure story as an example of how stories progress. But, this quite easily fits into any kind of genre or any kind of writing you're doing, really. Dan Harmon, for example, used this a lot when he was writing Community. That's a comedy set in a school. It's not this epic sort of adventure thing, but most stories will fit this basic narrative of you start in a familiar world, everything gets turned on its head, and then the characters go back to their familiar world having changed somehow. And this is just a great way of visualizing it. I'm being literal with the examples because it's easier to explain this, but obviously, depending on your story, you don't have to fit in quite so literally to this. So next is the go section. And this is when the hero has to leave, basically. They have to venture into this unknown world, and everything is beyond their control. So they've gone from this mundane world at the beginning, up here, and they've realized they need something, and to get that thing, they've realized that they have to leave their home and get thrown into this unknown world. And that's sort of the beginning of the quest, So that could be when, Frodo leaves the Shire and goes to find his companions to help him go and destroy the ring. The next section, the fourth section, is the search. And you've noticed now we're in the chaos world. We're in this second half of this globe, of this wheel. And this is the chaos section. This is when all the sort of action happens. And now in the search section, the main character comes up against all these obstacles in this new world that they found themselves in. To overcome these things and eventually find the thing they're looking for, they need to use whatever skills they've got and also develop some new skills in order to adapt to their surroundings. And this can lead to a lot of trouble. And this is where a lot of the sort of tension and action of the story can come in. And this can take up quite a large section of the story. So this could be, let's just say, if we're talking about all three Lord of the Rings books, it's, this is when the Fellowship have been split up. This is like the lowest part of the story for the characters, the most worrying part for all the main characters. The Fellowship have been split up. Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli have gone off to try and find Merry and Pippin and rescue them. And Frodo and Sam are on their own, off to Mordor, and Gollum's following them. They've got to adapt to things. Now, this next section is the find section, and this is when the main characters find the thing that they've initially set out to find. They overcome the main obstacles in the story, but as they find the thing, new obstacles come along, which they didn't foresee. Now, this would probably be when Frodo destroys the ring. It's when they actually do the thing they meant to do. They come up against Gollum again, who tries to take it off them at the very last moment. And, there's the final battles happening everywhere around them. Things could go either way at the flip of a coin. They could either totally lose or totally win. And Frodo destroys the ring, and the main thing that started the story off has been done. Now, the next part is the take. So everything's gone well, the thing has been done, but they're beginning to realize that something else has to be lost. So it's almost like an exchange. While they can find the thing or achieve the thing that they initially wanted to go out and achieve, as almost like a trade-off, they have to lose something else. Something really important has to change or be lost. So this could be, this could probably be, literally, it could be Frodo's finger being bitten off. So he can destroy the ring, but he's also lost his finger. But also, and this will come a bit later, he's actually lost something else, isn't he? When the ring was destroyed, something inside Frodo that was deeply connected to the ring is also lost. And that is explored in these final two sections. Now, in the return section, we're finally leaving this chaos part of the story, and we're returning back into the order half up here. So, the heroes have done the thing they wanted to do, they found the thing they wanted to find, and they're returning back to the normal world, returning back to the mundane world that they were comfortable in at the beginning of the story, all the way back up here. So they've gone all the way around, and they're up here again. On the face of it, they're back. Everything is back to how it was. They're comfortable again. Everything's familiar. Our characters maybe think this is where the story's over. And I think at this point, a lot of stories would end. But as you'll see in the next one, it can be more interesting just to hold on and just explore something else before you type the end. So I suppose this would be when, obviously, they go back to the Shire. So in the films, in the books, it's a bit different because there is another challenge. Saruman has taken over the Shire. But let's just go with the films because it's a clear example of this structure. The hobbits ride back into the Shire. They're wearing their fancy clothes and the ring is destroyed. Everything seems okay on the face of it. They're back in the Shire. Everything's exactly as it was when they left. Sam can get married. Everything's great. But is it really great? So this last section is the change section, and this is a really interesting one. The hero's done. The hero has won, basically. Everything has been done that they wanted to do. They found the thing they wanted to find, but they're realizing now that they're back in their comfortable world, they're realizing that something's changed about them. Something deep inside them has changed, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing, or neither. As a result of all of these challenges that they've been through to achieve the thing they wanted to do, they've changed as a person. They've learnt new things down here. They've come up against challenges that they would have never even imagined back in their comfortable world at the beginning. And because of all those things, they've changed. It's a great example in Lord of the Rings. Frodo's back, but he has changed so much that he no longer feels comfortable in the world that he was comfortable in at the beginning. And so he has to leave and go across the sea with the elves. He's been through so much trauma, and his connection with the ring has taken its toll on him, and he can no longer be the person he once was. So in Lord of the Rings, it's a bittersweet thing because feels like he's lost something of himself. But it can be a good thing as well. They've changed and grown as a person. So it just depends on whatever the story is. Yeah, so that's the Harmon cycle. So I just typed these descriptions in the segments here for the purposes of this video. But I'll be deleting all of these and leaving the segments blank. And I'll probably print this whole thing out and just write by hand and plan the story as I go, or do a small plan of where I think the story's going to be going in this. And then just have this with me while I'm writing during NaNoWriMo. I've done ones in the past where it's filled with writing and I've made notes coming out the side. And it's really messy, but that's kind of a good thing. This is like a great top-down view of what your story is, and it can change as you're going. So yeah, hopefully you can see how the Harmon cycle can be a really great, flexible plan as you're writing a story. Yeah, and back to me. So yeah, there we go. I'm not going to show me planning this story in these videos because obviously that would give away the story, and I'm not ready to do that yet. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about where I am in this whole thing and how I'm going about NaNoWriMo. Like I said, I wasn't originally ever going to plan this story. I haven't planned any of it so far, apart from the general idea that I have in my head. But I do think because 50,000 words, it's quite a big undertaking, especially when I don't have the entire month. I'm going to be away for some of it. So I think I do need to go forward being realistic, but also without sacrificing that goal of 50,000 words. Because it would just be so amazing to finish this novel in 1 month by the end of November, finally. I think that goal will be enough to keep me going. But it is a big undertaking, 50,000 words in 1 month. It's, obviously way more than I've ever done in that stretch of time. It's doing what I've already written twice in 1 month. And what I've already done took me like 1.5 years, 2 years to do. So it's basically doing 1.5 years to 2 years worth of work twice in 1 month, which when I put it that way is actually really daunting. But this is why I've decided I'm going to be planning it. So there we go. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm going to be making lots of videos in November chronicling this whole journey, as I've said before. Please subscribe. It means a lot. Also like and comment and hit the little bell. I'll give another update soon. I also put updates on my Instagram, which the link to is in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Happy Preptober to all those that celebrate, and a merry NaNoWriMo. And yeah, thanks for watching. Goodbye.